Ah, condo life. What a dream come true. No lawn to take care of, maybe hit the pool later, maybe the gym. It's great. Or is it? In this video, we're going to talk about the looming condo crisis that's about to hit the fan in Florida and what it may do to the future of Florida real estate. Stay tuned.
I know, we were looking at the brochure.
You what?
Why, you thinking of moving?
No, not really.
Because if you are, you shouldn't. There's nothing available in that development.
Are you telling me there's not one condo available in all of Del Boca Vista?
That's right. They went like hotcakes.
Let's talk about the appeal of condos for a little while. So there are different types of condos throughout Florida. You have the oceanfront high-rises, you have the urban high-rises, and then scattered throughout Central Florida, where I am, that's the Orlando area, you have a lot of older buildings. They're maybe 2 stories high, maybe 3 stories high. Some of them have only 4 units per building. So when I think of a condo, it may be completely different than what you think of when you think of a condo. But in general, the one thing they all have in common is it is supposed to be a low maintenance lifestyle with a lot of amenities. Now, not every condo community has great amenities. Some offer a world-class resort-style pool. Some don't even offer covered parking. But basically, in all cases, what you're responsible for if you're a condo owner is what's inside your unit, not outside. So from the drywall in is the general rule of thumb of what a homeowner is responsible for. Condos can be a great choice for first-time home buyers, let's say, people who aren't experienced with home ownership, who are scared to take on all the responsibility and maintenance of having an actual house. They need some help. They're great for older people who don't want to take care of lawns anymore. And they're great for people who maintain a different residence outside of Florida and they just want to be able to shut their door, leave the condo and forget about it and know that everything is going to be fine. And the property taxes are low because you don't own any of the dirt underneath it. You just own your unit and then a portion of the common elements. Great. Sounds great, right? And yet, at the same time, they really aren't great for anyone. Now, I've been a realtor full-time in Central Florida since 2009. And let me tell you, I did my time in a condo prior to becoming a realtor. And I got a taste of that lifestyle, and I have to tell you, I encourage people to consider very carefully if they really want to be sharing a wall with their neighbors. Even as I'm sitting in this office making a video, I can hear somebody on the phone next to me, in the office next to me. Imagine this is your house and it's 2 a.m. You may not want to hear somebody on the phone and be able to understand their every word, and yet that very often is the case in a condo. You want to buy a condo? Sure, I'll help you buy one, but I will make darn sure that you are aware of the things that can go haywire. And that means spending time in the condo to see how loud the neighbors are, thinking about if I'm on the top floor, which is a great spot in a condo, what are my neighbors going to hear? And am I going to be able to tolerate the repercussions of that? Which in my case was an issue because we had a young family and my kids were stomping around because they were 1 and 3. And I drove my downstairs neighbor crazy, who would then call the police, call the security guards, play a John Philip Sousa march on full blast, on repeat, on her CD player, and leave her condo for me to enjoy. It was a nightmare. For me, I find it too many people too close together. Apart from the quality of life issues, the condo market always seems to take a bigger hit when there's a problem with the economy. And that was true in 2008, and that's what I want to talk about now. This is my Orlando MLS, and I went back to a 365-day period, roughly right around 2010, just to show you what was going on in the condo world when the market crashed. And I want to show you the least expensive condo sold for $2,900. The next one, $4,500. I flipped through 14 pages of condos. It's 25 on each page. And on the bottom of the 14th page, the sales price we were up to was $19,900. In that 365-day period, there were like 4,925 condos sold. Last year in Orlando, this was the city of Orlando that I was looking at. Last year, 2,091 condos sold in total. So what we saw happening was investors swooped in and just grab those condos when they were super cheap. So now if you take any of these, in particular, really, really low price units from 2010, and you look up in public records, you will see LLC after LLC after LLC, meaning corporation, owning these condos. So that's probably obvious, but why is that important? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the people who are attracted to condos are generally first-time home buyers. Go to the lender says, all right, you're approved to up to $200,000. The buyer starts looking around online. and looks at houses and realizes that a $200,000 house is either, an hour and a half away from Orlando or basically needs to be torn down. And so they start looking at less expensive options and maybe look at townhouses a little bit. Well, there aren't any really good townhouses at that price point either. Then they'll go to condos. And that's when they tell me, hey, we found some condos we'd like to look at. And the problem is these first-time home buyers, they don't have a lot of cash. And so they're qualified for things like FHA loans or very low down payment, conventional financing, 1%, 3%, things like that. So the problem is not the buyer getting financing, but it's that these condo buildings, because they are so heavily owned by investors and not owner occupied, or there's one investor who bought up a certain number of those units, they're not warrantable, which means there's very limited financing available to them. And for the most part, it requires 25% down, which once again pushes out our entry-level buyers from being able to purchase an affordable condo. Now, I am talking about the lower end condos right now. I'm not talking about your luxury condos or beachfront condos. Across the board, it is very difficult for the people who would want to buy these condos to live in them for a low price to be able to buy them. So let's talk about what's happening in the condo market right now and why this is so relevant. Right now in Florida, we have about 60,000 condos and townhomes for sale. However, I do see that number is probably going to increase, and that's due to new condo legislation. Now, I'm sure if you live in the US, you saw what happened a few years ago in South Florida. A condo building collapsed in the middle of the night and killed almost 100 people. And as a result of that, new condo legislation has come into force. And this legislation is aimed at making sure that condo buildings are structurally safe and that the associations have the necessary reserves, or like a savings account, to make changes and make improvements and repairs as they are needed. So what's happening right now by the end of 2024 is that every condo that is over 3 stories tall, once it hits 30 years old, in the whole state, it has to have a milestone inspection by an architect or an engineer. And any building whose association existed before 2022 has to have a structural integrity reserve study done if it's above 3 stories. So this reserve study is definitely affecting a lot of condos, even in the Central Florida area. And that is, the report will tell the condo association when certain things, major systems in the condo, need to be replaced and how much they anticipate that will cost. So let's say, for example, that the report finds that the buildings are going to need a new roof in 3 years, and that's going to cost $100,000. I'm just making this easy. So that means roughly $33,000 per year has to be saved, and that's going to be divided up among all those owners because they only have 3 years. Now, if it's 20 years down the line and they say they need $100,000, that's going to be a lot simpler to accumulate. And not every condo building doesn't have reserves. Some are already doing this. Some were doing this on their own without having to be policed, so they're in better shape. So there's one condo community in particular in Orlando that made the news this spring because their reserve study said that they needed to save up $17 million. And suddenly every condo owner got a letter in the mail and there was just a huge assessment. Some people were assessed $22,000, some people were assessed $11,000. These were not super expensive condos, and it took the community, everybody was just shocked when they got this news, and people went to social media and there were lots of news articles about this. And what ended up happening, as far as I can tell, is there was a big board meeting and that board was ousted and they got a new board in place. But that board, it sounds like, they're trying to tell people like, we'll do what we can, but we have to save up this money. But let's think about this a little bit. Now, I keep mentioning that condos are low maintenance, but what I'm talking about is that you don't have to be outside physically maintaining the outside of your condo or the grass or the yard or the flowers or the pool. But they're not no maintenance. Somebody has to be taking care of them. And I think a lot of these condo communities have been just putting off repairs over and over again. And, the owners push for that because they want to keep the association fees low. And they're thinking, well, I don't care if we get a new roof in 10 years. I'm not going to own it in 10 years. And so everybody keeps passing the buck. And that has to stop based on this new legislation. And I have personally seen very poorly maintained condo communities over the years. And I point that stuff out to buyers because you don't want to get involved in a condo community just because the association fee is low. That isn't necessarily a good thing. I remember seeing a condo community where it was just a 2-story one, wood frame from the 1970s. One of the homeowners had to push a ladder up next to their staircase because their staircase was so rotten. They had to climb up and down a ladder to get in their unit. And I think it's unfortunate that we had to have legislation to force people to maintain the communities, but a lot of that comes down to who's on the board and what their goals are. So you don't necessarily have the most financially responsible people on the board or the people who know how to repair things or understand what needs to be done. A lot of times what you get is people who have a lot of time on their hands or people who have a specific issue that they want to control within the community. Those are your board members. And it's now their responsibility to make sure that these reserves are in place. They no longer have the ability to brush it under the carpet or push it off for future owners. Every community has to have the appropriate reserves now. Moreover, as I touched upon in my last video, and if you haven't watched that, I'll drop a link to it here, condo associations are not immune to the increases in homeowners insurance rates. So when you own a condo, you don't have to insure the outside of the building. That's taken care of, that's part of your fees. You have to have content insurance or something like renter's insurance to protect your items within your condo. But if your condo isn't being properly maintained and your roof is old, your insurance rates are going to go sky high if you can even find someone to cover you. And in one South Florida condo, it became the case that they couldn't find anybody to even take on their condo building. They had to layer, I read, 11 different insurance policies just to cover everything because they didn't have the money saved to replace their roof. And the roof was the issue. Nobody would insure it. They couldn't pay for it. Then they couldn't pay for their homeowner's insurance. It's just like a never-ending circle. And as a result, their insurance fee went up 300% to $3.9 million per year with these 11 policies that they had to layer. So really, unless the condo has been extremely well managed and extremely well run over decades of time, no condos are immune to this increase. And as a result, the number of active listings in Florida has increased by 85% since last year. But interestingly, prices have not really dropped. Those are up a little bit over last year. So of course, the next question becomes, what happens to these condo owners who can't afford to chip in $20,000 or $100,000 or whatever the assessment might be, or pay, $1,200 a month for their association fee? What's going to happen to them if they can't pay? Well, one choice is, of course, the HOA or the condo association can foreclose on them if they're not making their payments every month. And this is a real issue for people. There are plenty of people out there who cannot afford these new assessments. Another interesting outcome I've heard is that entire condo association can choose to sell out to a developer who can then tear it down and put a brand new condo up or whatever. I can't imagine this playing out because it seems like there would have to be some people who would fight it, put it in court and drag it out for years on end, but that's a possible outcome also, is just total redevelopment if the owners cannot afford the necessary repairs to the common elements. And of course, there are people who are just trying to sell as quickly as possible, and that's reflected in the 85% increase in listings year over year. Now, if you are thinking about purchasing one of these condos and you're waiting for the prices to fall, there is another thing that I've noticed, and that is that a lot of this is not really being discussed in the MLS. And it might be because some of these buildings aren't required to have the milestone or the structural reserve report. But I dug through pages of condo listings in the MLS and I only found one milestone report uploaded in the MLS. And I want to point out, if you are planning on buying a condo, if you're interested in buying a condo, the condo disclosure now states that the buyer has the right to ask for these reports. They have the right to ask for them and the seller must provide them on their dime. So be sure that you're asking for these reports. You need to understand what you're buying. Has the report even been done yet? Because here's the other thing, not every condo association has been able to get their reports done. They are allowing the condo association to schedule the report even if it's jumping into 2025. So don't think if you've passed December 31st, 2024 that the association is in the clear. It just has to be on the books, on the calendar to be done at some point for them to stay out of trouble. What the trouble is, I don't think anybody quite knows. As I mentioned, I did find the one milestone report, so I read through it and it showed that there were no structural issues that needed to be addressed immediately, but then it provided a budget for everything that was going to have to be done, and it showed how much was going to have to be saved to contribute to those needed upgrades in the future. So if you are a condo owner and you're thinking about selling your condo, I think the one thing I want to say is be transparent. Make sure that you're disclosing what's going on. That's a material fact that affects the value of your property. Make sure that you're disclosing this stuff. It's only going to lead to more lawsuits down the line, and you don't want to be on the receiving end of that. And buyers, be sure that you're asking for all of these reports if you're planning on considering buying a condo. And if you are thinking about buying or selling property in the Central Florida area or anywhere in Florida, all my contact information is always underneath this video. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thanks for watching. Till next time.